Sure, definitely think it's a huge problem. A lot of marketers, they just don't even know what content or even just digital touch points are contributing to their pipeline. I think a lot of people are using like first touch or last touch attribution, but it's just a tiny part of the picture.
Before we jump into today's episode, I'd like to give a quick shout out to the sponsor for this episode, Ahrefs. Ahrefs provides you with an all-in-one SEO toolset that does everything from rank tracking to backlink analysis, keyword research, and technical audits. The best part, you can now use Ahrefs Webmaster Tools for free to identify and prioritize optimization opportunities for your website, see all the keywords that your web pages are ranking for, take a close look at the websites that link back to and refer you in their content, and analyze other websites to find out what drives their rankings. Visit ahrefs.com/AWT and sign up for free. And now, back to today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the SaaS SEO Show. I'm your host, George Hasiotis, and today I'm very excited to be joined by Phoebe Noce. Phoebe is the marketing director at Knotch. Prior to joining Knotch, she served as a marketing director for a logistics SaaS startup and worked as a marketing consultant for CBG food brands. She also spent several years as the head of marketing and creative at a B2B digital media company. She was previously an editor at Cooking Light magazine, a Time Inc. publication. Phoebe holds an MBA from Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management and a bachelor in magazine journalism from the University of Missouri. We are going to talk about some very interesting things today, and I'm very excited about it. Phoebe, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
As we do with every guest here at the SaaS SEO Show, I would love to know a few things about you and your background. I mean, besides the ones that we shared in the introduction. So if you could share a few things about your journey, that would be a great way to kick things off.
Sure. So I originally come from the editorial world. And I think like a lot of people who do come from the editorial world, you go into it with bright eyes and a lot of ideals. But a lot of us jump into marketing because even for one, the journalism industry, as we all know, is not doing too well, but also marketing still offers that the brand storytelling, some of those same aspects of journalism that we all got into it for, but with a little bit more tangential results. And so I've made the switch to the dark side of marketing. And I ended up going into startups and kind of making that my thing. I started at a digital media startup, then went into, then did some consulting, but then went into a logistics SaaS startup just because I knew that industry was booming. And this was like at the beginning of the pandemic and all that. So, or just actually a little bit before the pandemic started. And then one of the reasons why I'm at the company I am today was because I was part of the community, and it just seems like a really great product that I wish that I was able to use. And coincidentally, they had an opening, and that's how I ended up at Knotch.
Okay, so today you're at Knotch. For people who haven't heard of the tool and the company, not the tool, but the company, can you please let us know a few things about who you are, what you do, and who is the typical user and gets the most value?
Sure. So basically, Knotch is software, and we make audience journey data really simple and understandable and actionable. Audience journeys are super complex, as I think we all know. I mean, they take multiple weeks over a lot of different sessions. Your audience takes a lot of routes that you don't expect them to take. You might be planning a specific pathway for them to take, but they're likely not to take it. So Knotch basically lets you visualize what those journeys are, literally step by step, know what sources and content is actually driving to high value actions and conversions, and basically how those people got there. And then also prioritize, how you spend your budget, and make it more effective and efficient And I would say our top people who use it are most marketers, but digital marketers, growth marketers, content marketers are probably the top three.
Okay, the thing is, as I was, taking a look at the website prior to recording this episode, I thought that, based on my understanding of what the tool's capabilities are, that this tool solves a very, critical problem, which is trying to help people working in, content teams communicate the value of their work, which I know is a very big pain point because, we work with these teams. Okay, in many cases we guide them, in other cases we collaborate with them, and so on and so forth. And at the same time, knowing that, I know, even though I'm not a data guy myself, I know that it's pretty difficult to find all these journeys and connect all these dots. Like, I've tried to do that myself using Google Analytics, for example. It's really difficult. And I think that other tools that are in the market that supposedly, like the promise is that, you can have a more, let's say, clear view of what's going on. In most cases, what happens is that they add an extra layer of complexity. And so for me, there's not enough clarity when it comes to content marketing attribution nowadays. And I would like to hear your thoughts though. Like, what do you think? Do you see this as a problem? And what would you say in general is wrong when it comes to content marketing attribution nowadays?
Sure, definitely think it's a huge problem. A lot of marketers, they just don't even know what content or even just digital touch points are contributing to their pipeline. I think a lot of people are using like first touch or last touch attribution, but it's just a tiny part of the picture. For example, like if you spend a lot of money promoting that first touch piece of content because you see that it has that a lot of people do end up on that based on like page views, or if you did paid search based on clicks, you don't even know at the end of the journey whether or not that's driving to the conversion or the high value action that you want. Same with last touch. If you're just looking at last touch, that is the last thing that they looked at right before they converted. But what did they do all before that? And how long did that journey take? You just don't even know. And so, yeah, I think content marketing is just having a really tough time proving its value to the organization. And if this recession or economic downturn happens, like everyone thinks it's happening or will especially happen at the end of this year, I mean, budgets are tightening, and content marketing is often one of the first things to get cut, if not just marketing budgets in general. And I think that people are looking. I think a lot of people want to find ways to prove their value to the organization. They just don't really have the resources to do so.
This is a very important point. I mean, very often we have conversations where people from inside companies that we work with or want to work with, they just need help, like proving the ROI, proving the value, and at the end of the day, like getting a more clear view of what's going on. Okay, so that we can communicate that effectively, and so that we can get more internal buy-in and so on to do even more things when it comes to content marketing, SEO, whatever. Okay, I understand that, and obviously this is a pain, as we mentioned earlier. But I would like to hear your thoughts on a very practical level. What could be the benefits of having a better view of content marketing performance using a tool like Knotch, for example? In other words, and I will use a word that you're using on your website. Why should companies care about the quote unquote missing middle that is part of your messaging, I guess?
Sure. It may be helpful to define the missing middle first. So basically, the missing middle is the audience's entire journey between that first and last touch. So literally, what you're missing is all of that data that you can't see, or maybe you're just not set up to see well. That middle touch could actually show up in a lot of journeys that end in conversion. So I was talking about the issues with relying on first touch or last touch attribution. Well, if you could see what was happening in the middle of the journey, you might find that this one piece of content always showed, like this one use case, for example, always showed up somewhere in the middle of the journey that ended in a conversion. But you wouldn't necessarily know that without being able to see it. And so you could be wasting, money or time promoting or distributing or honestly creating things that just don't matter. And even if they are contributing to your pipeline, how could you be doing that better, right? How could you be putting money towards something that would make it a lot more efficient?
And I guess this way you can, like, let's say, optimize your customer journey, and this could, as I think about it, this could lead to many great things, such as, for example, reducing the sales cycle length, because you know what needs to be done in order to accelerate things. But I guess the benefits are really endless, from getting to have a granular view of content marketing performance, what drives performance in general. Now, you mentioned and you focused on your answer a lot on this middle, this missing middle, let's say, part of the journey. And I would like to hear your thoughts on whether or not, based on your experience, I mean, is there a single attribution model, for example, last touch, that's enough to paint the whole picture regarding content marketing attribution, or we should use different models and try to I don't know, use a different approach?
So I think that's a tough question, because I feel like every journey is going to be or almost every journey is going to be multi-touch, especially for something that, if your product has like a high consideration value. You might see, like a retail good where you put up an Instagram ad and immediately someone just adds to cart and buys it. That may not be that might be a situation where you could rely on those metrics. But for the most part, for a lot of, and especially for SaaS, it's going to take a lot longer. And so you really have to consider multi-touch attribution. And I don't even know if I want to hone in on the word attribution, because I feel like everyone says it's a dirty word these days. But it's really just understanding what are all of these different touches that are influencing to that end conversion that you're trying to drive people to, or that high value action that you're really trying to drive people to. And so if we think about audience journeys as always being multi-touch, that's just how it's always been. Understanding it with clarity, I think that's really what you have to do to understand like the actual whole picture of how all of your touch points are contributing to pipeline.
Okay, one assumption that I have, and something that bothered me for a while, even for our own business, and I would like to hear your thoughts on that, is that when you have lower value, let's say, products or services, it's always better to reduce friction so that things are easier. For example, let's say that you have a SaaS product that starts at $9 per month, and on the other end of the spectrum, you have a higher value product, and even an enterprise solution that starts, I don't know, the contract starts at $1K per month, and you need to sign up for a 12-month contract, and so on and so forth. And my assumption is that in the latter case, the latter example, it's better to add friction, so that you can qualify and make sure that people who are like the people who you funnel in and you get closer towards to the end goal are better qualified, and at the end have proven that they really want this. Do you think that this is do you think that this is really applicable in some cases, or you haven't thought about it? And I would like to hear your thoughts.
I think it can be applicable, but to me, it's not about adding I think some people add those friction points because they have a hard time finding those quality leads or those quality potential customers. If you already know who are the higher value people that you are that are converting, and you understand how those people got there, if you understand that pathway, you can just shape the pathway based on that. So you might actually have some high quality customers that only took 4 touches and across only a few days to actually get there. You just might not know that without that data. So I see value in what you're saying, and that I think that can be helpful for some folks. But if you know the pathway that your people are taking, that are the leads that you actually want, and they are getting to that conversion point, there's not really a need to add all of those different friction points to make sure that you're having, better quality leads.
Yeah, it makes sense. You mentioned multi-touch attribution earlier, and in general, customer journeys that are multi-touch. And I would like to hear your thoughts on whether the future of marketing attribution and performance when it comes to SaaS companies is multi-touch. Do you think that this is where we are heading, or this is where we are at already?
I think that I don't know if it's the future. I think that's how it's always been. Your audience has always been taking multiple touches on their journey to get to that point. I think it's really, if you're talking about finding solutions or ways to figure that out as a company, I think that is the future. People are starting to see the value in that and looking for solutions to help them, or maybe they already have a solution like Google Analytics that they're willing to get into that nitty gritty and do all that analysis for. I think people are just wanting to understand it with more clarity. That's the future.
You mentioned Google Analytics, and I mentioned Google Analytics in the beginning of our conversation as well. Every time I try to, and once again, I'm not a data guy by no means, but every time I try to get into Google Analytics to try to figure things out, like, it's just really hard as I see it. And my question is, how can we know what journeys are most impactful? And obviously, impactful differs for every company. Every company has their own interpretations of what's impactful and how they measure the impact. So how do we know what journeys are the most impactful? And how can we leverage that information, that insight, that intel to get better results as part of our marketing strategy?
Well, if you were using Google Analytics, that'd be pretty tough. Honestly, with Google Analytics, especially GA4, which I know not everyone, but a lot of people dislike it. At least that's what word on the street is. I played around with it a little bit. GA4 makes it really hard. And I have a hypothesis that they want you to lean on all of their portfolio of products and their customer service in order to actually find those solutions. Honestly, if you had Google Analytics, you would have to have a stellar tech team that would help you set everything up properly. And then still, it's hard to download all of those insights. You're, clicking the branches of a tree to figure out what the pathway is that people took, and it's not easy to distill that information. Is it possible? Maybe. But I think when people are looking at, what journeys are most impactful, that really depends on what your business outcomes and your objectives are. So if you think about building your content marketing strategy, ideally you're thinking about it from that business outcome level. Then you're identifying your objectives, and then you're deciding what are those KPIs or tactics or metrics that ladder up to all of that. So when you're deciding what journeys are most impactful, you might be looking at a number of different things. So it's not just about what journey is driving to the most conversions, but it could also be, like you mentioned earlier, shortening that sales cycle, or it could be about spend if you're on a tight budget. So it really depends on your company and you know, what are the objectives that you've set up for yourself. But say that shortening the sales cycle or accelerating the sales cycle is super important to you. You might be looking at which journeys are literally, you know, only taking days instead of weeks, instead of months, but you might still want to look at what are those longer journeys and seeing, okay, well, how can we shortcut? How can we change something about what we're doing to get people from A to B faster? So it could literally be changing up CTA placement on your page, or if you know if you already know who that lead is, maybe you're, you know, sending them that next piece of content that they needed to take in that step straight to their email inbox. It really depends on you, but having all of that information, all those pieces, helps you make better data-driven decisions.
Do you think that we could get as deep with that process as, for example, we have figured out and we know what journeys not only are the shortest ones in terms of, you know, shortening the sales cycle, but through these journeys we get the clients or the customers with the highest LTV? Is this something that you have seen, and do you think that, you know, this happens, or it's journey irrelevant, let's say?
Well, when you're thinking about customers with the highest LTV, like some of the things you can play with are like customer acquisition costs, right? And so you could, if that's something that a lever that you're trying to pull, you know, optimizing your spend based on, you know, the referral source that you see in your journey data that is literally driving to the most conversions. Like if you spend more there, you will likely drive more conversions, right? And so you would be lowering your acquisition costs versus wasting it on, you know, a paid search ad that might not be actually converting, but has a low CPC. If you're also thinking about customer LTV in a retention sort of perspective, you should also be thinking about the journey post lead capture, right? Or not post lead capture, but post sale. Like, don't forget about that post sales experience. What is that additional content, or what are those additional, you know, marketing initiatives that you're doing to continue to retain that customer, or the old like marketing term, surprise and delight them, so that they become sticky and continue to, you know, spread the good news about your product, right? There are a lot of things that you could do to find to ultimately find customers that have that better LTV. It just all depends.
I think that the last point that you made is very important, because we often focus, especially when it comes to content marketing at SEO, okay, by default, because it's a search game after all. So we are so focused on acquisition and everything that happens before that, and we often forget, okay, but the customer, the person who has given us their credit card details and they get charged to use our service, our product, whatever, every month, they still need information, guidance, everything, and we better be the ones who support them and give them all the information that they need. And so it would be very exciting and very interesting actually to know what are the journeys post-sale, as you mentioned, in order to retain those people, make them power users, and keep them more engaged with your product overall. So I think that this is a very important point. Now, we talk about all these interesting things, and I would like to discuss marketing KPIs a bit. First of all, and this is based on my experience, but I would like to hear your thoughts. First of all, why do you think content marketeers and content teams fight, in many cases, measurement and getting measured against specific KPIs?
Well, I think part of it is that a lot of people don't have the resources to do it properly. And so they're being measured against things that they don't know they're actually impacting, right? Or I have seen a lot of folks who, and I say this as someone who came from editorial, but from the editorial brand side, traditionally you haven't been measured on some of those things, and then now someone just wants to do that, and so you may take that a little bit harshly, because you just never had to do that before, and a lot of us just want to write what we want to write because we think it's going to be good for the brand. I actually feel like if you have the right tools, granted, being measured is extremely beneficial as a content marketer, because you can prove, for example, something that an article that someone thought was super fluffy and too top of funnel, well, it's actually impacting or influencing conversions in all of these journeys. Or maybe there's an initiative that you're taking with video that some of your leadership doesn't really believe in, but if you have a little bit of bandwidth to gather a little bit of data, you can actually show them that it is influencing people to get to this high value action. So I think if you have the right resources, measurement can actually really be your friend.
I agree with you. One of the KPIs that's often used by content teams is organic traffic. And my sense is that organic traffic is used, and organic clicks are used as the end all be all regarding content marketing and SEO performance, obviously. Do you find that wrong? And if yes, what do you think should companies do regarding KPI tracking?
Well, I think organic is great. And a lot of times some of your best quality customers do come from organic because, they were in a position to buy. But organic clicks are just an indicator. You might see that someone is clicking on something a ton, or you might have a ton of page views on something, but that piece of content isn't actually converting someone or in any kind of pathway to convert someone. And organic is also not everything. I feel like a lot of people hate on paid, but I think if you use paid as a strategic way to boost the things that are driving to conversion, that's content marketers should really embrace that more. In terms of what companies should do regarding KPI tracking, I think it's just, again, setting it up correctly. I think a lot of people are picking KPIs or picking metrics because either it came from top down and this is what other initiatives are being measured against, or they were just told, like, these are the things that we're going to measure you for. And they actually don't ladder up to the initiatives that they're doing or the objectives that they marketing has defined, or even ultimately the business outcomes. And so I think that's where the breakdown is regarding KPIs. It's just that they're not measuring the right things.
Speaking of the right things, I was reading one of Knotch's blog posts. I don't know who the author is, but the author mentions that metrics in this blog post, metrics like traffic or time on site, aren't necessarily vanity metrics, which I would say, having been involved in many conversations around metrics and KPIs all these years, I would say that a very, like many people conceive these metrics to be as vanity metrics, even though I'm not quite sure what's the definition of vanity metrics. But I don't know if you were the one who wrote this blog post, but can you please elaborate on that a bit and explain why and how connecting these metrics to business outcomes can lead to more meaningful KPI tracking?
So I did not write that blog post. My coworker, Nick, who's actually on our consulting team, he wrote this one. I remember it well because I did edit it, but vanity metrics is just such a bad word these days. And everyone, they're just they're maligned, I guess. And this is anything from like impressions or page views or likes or some of the things that you mentioned too. Vanity metrics have a use, right? They're not completely useless. It's just how you layer them together with your other data to use that to understand the bigger picture. And so I think when we're talking about connecting these metrics to business outcomes, let me just give you an example of something something you might want to do. So for example, like if your outcome is like improving conversion rate for leads to become actual customers, then you might want to identify like your objective based on that outcome to be increasing your lead engagement rate. So how do you measure your lead engagement rate, or what are some of those KPIs that you might identify for that? It might be like your email click-through rate. It could be your social engagement, for example. And so I think, and I hate to go back to that kind of framework, but I think a lot of people just aren't doing their due diligence in creating that actual framework. And that is why they're finding their KPI tracking to be meaningless, is because they're not layering those additional, they're not having the rigor of measuring these things up to business outcomes. And then they're also just taking each individual vanity metric as gospel truth, or, this thing had a ton of page views, so let's go spend a ton of money on that. It is an indicator, or it is a data point that you can use to say, okay, well, maybe we should take a deeper look at this, but it's not the only thing. But it's not useless, like some people are making it sound like by calling it a vanity metric.
Yeah, I agree with you. The last question that I have for you is, let's say that someone is listening to this episode and they fight against reporting and against measurement, but they know that sooner or later they have to report on some KPIs at the company that they are working at. What's the starting point of all that? I mean, what would you advise to such a person? What should they do first? How should they think about things? How should they communicate even the value of, for example, using a tool like Knotch to report better and like feel more confident about the work that they do? What would be your advice to these people?
If they build out that measurement framework, then they can show that this is what they need in order to effectively measure success or failure of whatever that initiative is. And when leadership sees that, guess what, they can't figure that out, or they only have certain data to figure that out, but there are these big gaps. I think that's when you can make a better business case. And I think at the end of the day, a lot of folks, they're afraid to tell leadership that, or their manager, that they can't connect marketing to business outcomes, or they can't connect it to pipeline, aside from some of these really surface level pieces of data that they have. I I think that people just shouldn't be afraid to ask for the things that they need, and show that, okay, well, if this is what you want, this is what I need to get there.
Yeah, I understand, and I must say that I agree with, especially with that last part of your answer about asking for more things. I mean, at the end of the day, if you see that it will be really helpful for you and for the company ultimately, to have, I don't know, a tool to have someone help you in that process of setting things up, and trying to understand what's going on, or even to get some strategic guidance. I guess that, you know, people should ask for help. This is at least what I understand from your answer, and I think that it's an important message for people who are listening to this episode. Now, the last question that, please, yes.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. I also think that when you do talk about how your work impacts business outcomes specifically, that's language that leadership understands, right? They don't necessarily want to get in the nitty gritty of what you're doing, but that if you're trying to make a case, right, you want to use that language that they understand, and then also tying things to budget and showing how, well, this software or having this extra data is going to make you more efficient with spend, or show them how you can lower, you know, CAC or CAC. Sorry, I like to say CAC for some reason, CAC, or how it can impact, you know, customer LTV, like we were talking about before. When you show them that this is that these are the things that will be impacted, ultimately people just want to make money or save money. And if you can show you know, your boss that that's what you're trying to get at, I think you can build a pretty good business case for getting software or you know, additional data.
Yeah, this is where all everything boils down to making money or saving money. I guess you framed it perfectly. Last question I have for you, Phoebe: where can people find out more and get in touch if they'd like?
Sure. You can find out more about Knotch on Knotch.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. My name is Phoebe Noce. Add me as a connection.
That's great. We will drop these links in the show notes, and I think that we will have to get you back on the show at some point, because there are so many aspects of attribution that, you know, we haven't touched on and that are unexplored, and unfortunately are not a big part of the conversation because they make most people feel uncomfortable about the work that they do. Because the truth is that we do all these things on a daily basis, but at the end of the day, no one really likes to, you know, be measured against specific metrics, and to have some like metrics that they need to get to, and so on and so forth. So thank you very much for the really insightful conversation, and really looking forward to a follow-up episode sometime in the near future.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was really fun.
Before you go, I'd like to give a quick shout out to the sponsor for this episode, Ahrefs. Ahrefs provides you with an all-in-one SEO toolset that does everything from rank tracking to backlink analysis, keyword research, and technical audits. The best part: you can now use Ahrefs Webmaster Tools for free to identify and prioritize optimization opportunities for your website, see all the keywords that your web pages are ranking for, take a close look at the websites that link back to and refer you in their content, and analyze other websites to find out what drives their rankings. Visit ahrefs.com/AWT and sign up for free.